Well, let us introduce ourselves. My name is Carl Wastie, and this is Zoe Brown. We're part of an afternoon drive show called KFM 94.5. And we knew that we had to say, hello to you first before this massive thing that is happening with Oprah. And I know that there's a word going around, a sentence called spilling the tea, but it's a lot more than that. It really is. So first and foremost, Omid, you are very, very close to, you're a royal reporter, and of course, very close to Harry and Meghan. So just to start things off, what's your relationship like with those two?
Yeah, well, I've been around the royal family for a long time. My first engagements were with William and Kate on their first ever tour. But with Harry and Meghan, the story has always been very different. We had the first American marrying into the House of Windsor, the first mixed-race woman marrying into the royal family. And so for me, as one of the only mixed-race royal correspondents, I guess I had a personal interest in the story too, and an excitement, because I felt that the royal family was actually progressing into the 21st century in a way that it had needed to for some time. And I found myself, as I got closer to those people working with Harry and Meghan, and of course friends of the couple themselves, and really got to know the couple through their own work, I saw a couple that were really frustrated with the situations that they were constantly facing within the palace. Senior aides leaking stories about them, sometimes very negative stories, to the British tabloids. When they would then complain about that, those complaints would fall on deaf ears. They were often told to, fall in line and, just accept that the palace will never comment on these things. And so, I'm not surprised that they're now doing this big 2-hour special with Oprah, because, we've all spent the last 4 years talking about them, but we haven't heard much from their own mouths.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. I mean, looking at, how the royals, like you mentioned, have progressed, but the British media hasn't. What's the response been that you've been picking up?
Yeah, it's very interesting. My whole career, I've worked for US media. And so being based over here in London, I get to see sort of both sides. And, I think America was very excited to have one of their own marrying into the House of Windsor. Over here in the UK, we sometimes suffer from sort of outsider syndrome, or whatever you want to call it, where I think if you come into a traditional space and are different, it's hard to find acceptance within that. And, I saw very early on, especially with a lot of the newspaper commentary, Meghan had barely even established her role as the Duchess of Sussex, but people were already ready to bring her down. All the things that perhaps in another environment, people would celebrate her for: being outspoken, being a feminist, being sort of standing up for various social issues, were kind of frowned upon within the institution, but also in a lot of the tabloids over here, who didn't like the fact that she wasn't the typical sort of submissive royal wife, there to look pretty and to speak whenever she's told to speak. And so, that then turned into some commentary that got quite ugly at times. It lent on a lot of sexist and racist stereotypes. We saw her called straight out of Compton. We saw ugly comments made about her mother's dreadlocks. It got really bad, and sadly, I don't think things have changed much since.
So if we look at last year, I'm thinking about the book that you co-wrote, Finding Freedom, and in there were some shocking sort of conclusions that I got from my side. In fact, findings from your side, the way you've been sort of tracking the story. And one that really stood out to me is the fact that they initially wanted to do the half and half, if you want to call it that. They wanted to do half royal duties and then half living their lives like a couple would want to, any couple. And it turns out that it was fully functioning. It actually made sense to me. It made sense to so many other people, but of course not to what is a monarchy that's not ready to change, it would seem. Just from that particular story and focusing on that half and half, Meghan has been outright saying that it wasn't her decision to do the Megxit thing, that this was something that was actually pushed upon them. And I'd like to just tap into that for a second in terms of what you know. Were they pushed out as opposed to what the media said was them stepping aside?
Yeah, there's a sort of notion over here that perhaps this is a couple that just quits. They turned their backs and sort of took away their respect for the royal family. And that's something that has not sat well with the British public. And that was one of the things I really wanted to get across in the book, was that this is a couple that for quite some time before that final moment when they did step away, they had been trying over and over again to try and make it work. First by speaking to those within the institution, then with royal family members about their grievances. A lot of that was down to their issues with the British press. And of course, as we know, that relationship is really important for the royal family. But for Harry and Meghan, they wanted to try and find a way to distance themselves from it, or at least be able to comment on the stories written about them. You know, the palace has that mantra of never complain, never explain. And it was hurting Harry and Meghan in the long run, because I think what we saw in the papers over here were caricatures of the couple that didn't really represent them. And so, yeah, they did try and be heard within the palace, and unfortunately it fell on deaf ears time and time again. So they took it upon themselves to come up with their own plan, that sort of half in, half out model that you referred to.
Yeah.
And that was what they presented to Prince Charles and to the Queen. And, you know, they had looked at other royal family members, such as Prince Michael of Kent, who has his own business and investments, but also carries out hundreds of royal engagements every year. So they kind of felt like, well, we could do that too. But they, of course, were told, you're senior members of the royal family, you're either here all in or you're gone. So I wouldn't say they were pushed out, but they were given a choice that forced them to leave.
Well, that's how it happens sometimes. They make it seem that way, but you really know it's actually a force out. It's kind of, you know, you take two of the bad options and enjoy which one you want to take. And there's actually a saying that if you give somebody options, you give them no choice. And I could feel that from this particular story. It's true. I mean, you can't just give somebody options. We have a right to free will, and they have a right to love each other. And that's why we fast forward to this Oprah interview. Why do you think that this is something that is happening right now, especially at this particular time? I'm sure there were many other opportunities that they could have taken on, but it's happening now with Oprah. Why do you think this is the time for them?
Yeah, the timing, I think, to some is a little confusing. Of course, unfortunately, Prince Philip's in hospital. It's worth pointing out that they agreed to interview with Oprah before any of that came to light. But it is unfortunate that looms in the background. We're also in the middle of a pandemic, and I think some people may watch this interview and think, your lives still are pretty good compared to maybe what other people, you know, out here in the world are struggling with during this difficult time. But, you know, this is a couple that had taken on a lot of the tabloids, and they had a privacy case against the Mail on Sunday that only concluded a couple of weeks ago. That was when Meghan was awarded a victory by the judge for copyright infringement and invasion of privacy, because the Mail had printed a private letter she'd written to her father. And so because that hung over them pretty much since February 2019, they weren't able to speak publicly in fear of jeopardizing the case and having a judge saying, well, you're speaking openly, so maybe your privacy isn't very important to you. So the second they had that verdict, they literally went to Oprah the next day and said, right, now we're ready. And so whilst the timing isn't perfect for us watching, it kind of makes sense when you think of just them and the situation that they are in. And you know, I think we're almost at the 1 year point from them stepping away. They've already confirmed that they're definitely not coming back, even though they were told that there was a door open for them if they wanted to revert back to how it used to be. So this is their way of sort of introducing themselves to America, but also putting a lot of the negativity from the past behind them.
Now, I know that there's a lot of royal protocol and they've stepped away. How honest will they really be in this interview?
Yeah, you know, I think had this interview taken place when they're working members of the royal family, we would have only had small, subtle glimpses into some of the very real situations that they face behind the scenes. Now there is no reason to have a filter. And I think what we may discover during this interview is that very few of their problems lie with senior members of the royal family. You know, Harry and Meghan do have a close relationship with the Queen, Prince Philip. We heard Harry talk about that recently with James Corden. I think we'll be hearing more about that, and people may be surprised because this is sort of being talked about as if it's a tawdry tell-all. But their problems lied within the institution of the monarchy, which isn't the family itself. That's kind of the firm or the machine that runs behind all of this. You know, we heard Diana many years ago talking about the men in grey suits. Well, now it's men and women in grey suits, and these are many of the people that Harry and Meghan had problems with. And so I think we'll hear the couple talk about that. I think we'll hear Meghan talking about race in the UK for the very first time, and some of the racist experiences that she has went through during her time as a working member of the royal family. And you know, I think ultimately they're also not here to just air their dirty laundry. This all has a purpose. They're launching a foundation in the US. I think a lot of the work they're going to do is to do with creating more positive online communities and, you know, things in that space. So they kind of want to be able to tell people that these are our own experiences and this is how we're sort of funneling them into the work that we're doing now.
If we were to just open up the firm concept, because I believe with the trailer there was actually a quote that was taken out of there from Meghan. From your side and from what you found, the firm itself and what they do and how they control, do you think that there'll be some specifics that'll come out as to how the monarchy are actually trying to control the lives of those who are connected to it? I know it's quite bold of me to say, but I think that it's important for us to unpack the way they operate in terms of, I mean, we can anecdotally say, surely they'll say your hands need to be in a certain place. You know, that's the commercial way of thinking about what the monarchy would control. But from your side, what are some of the things about the firm that you hope to come out?
I think what we'll hear is how much the no comment policy affected Harry and Meghan's emotional well-being. They'll talk about their mental health and how that was impacted by having to basically sit back and allow British tabloids to call them and accuse them of certain things that they were never able to sort of wipe off themselves. You know, I think a lot of the image that Brits have of Meghan today is formed by the British newspapers. She was called Duchess Difficult very early on, and that kind of fed off that somewhat racist stereotype of a powerful woman or a woman in a powerful position being too angry, too scary, too demanding, too difficult. And, you know, we've seen Kamala Harris talk about that. We've heard Michelle Obama talk about that. We've heard Serena Williams talk about that. You know, women of color in strong positions often face these kinds of accusations. And so I think we'll hear Harry and Meghan really putting words to some of the experiences that they've had. I think also in terms of the institution, it'll also be interesting for them to highlight the hypocrisy of, say, this week, Buckingham Palace announcing they're doing an internal investigation into bullying claims about Meghan. But at the same time, when Harry and Meghan made complaints about staff members leaking private information to the British tabloids, there was no internal investigation. So I think they're really going to highlight some of the hypocrisy at play. And that's certainly not going to go down well with the palace.
I can't imagine. Now, what do you think this interview will have with the relationship that is currently between Prince William and Kate? Do you think this will also have an impact on their relationship?
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, we've heard a lot about how Harry and Meghan are close to the Queen and Philip still. We don't hear much about William and Kate. And, you know, it's almost a year ago. It was the last time they saw each other at a Commonwealth service here in the UK. I think everyone will remember those awkward moments on camera, not exchanging a word. And in fact, even at the time, I've been told that was the first time they'd seen each other in 3 months. So we're now sort of heading into 16 months of not actually speaking in the same room together. And whilst I do hear that things have progressed in terms of some communication, of course, William had coronavirus himself, Prince Charles had coronavirus, there have been moments that have brought the family together, there is certainly a distance between the couples because, of course, William and Kate are stepping into gear to one day take on those positions of king and queen consorts. And I think that they're in a very different position to Harry and Meghan, who are one of the very few royals who have put family over duty. You know, the Queen's famous for putting duty first, and we respect her for that. And I think as our monarch, we want to feel that she treats the position in that way. For Harry and Meghan, there was no predetermined path. Harry was the spare heir. Why should the spare have to dedicate his entire life to a position that's not there for him? So Harry and Meghan will always have a very different approach and outlook on life to William and Kate. And I think that that will always serve as something that forces a distance between the two.
So now we look ahead. We look forward. There's a foundation coming. Beautiful. An Oprah interview that could cause some ripples, as you mentioned. What happens next for Harry and Meghan? In what do you anticipate being the outlook of their life? I mean, is it going to be a life of establishing a foundation and creating a more life of activism? Or do you see something else in their future?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been a shame because they moved to America in hopes to sort of hit the ground running, and then literally a pandemic struck the planet and has loomed over us for pretty much an entire year now. And so they haven't really been as out and about and as visible as they'd like to have been. And so this interview is also going to tell us like what the heck they've been up to behind the scenes. You know, we know about the Netflix series, we know about the Spotify deal. We don't really know about the projects themselves. And I think that the Oprah special will also give us insight into those. We'll then see over spring and summer some of those first projects on Netflix come out. And of course, the Spotify podcast series that they are massively involved in, and I hear really enjoying sort of doing that for the first time. And then, of course, we've got baby number 2 on the way. You know, last fall was a really sad and difficult time for them. Meghan spoke openly about having a miscarriage last summer. When she wrote that essay for the New York Times. And so they've really, I think we can now see that progress, but they've moved away from, I guess they've triumphed over tragedy. And the Oprah interview will not be a couple who are sitting there as the victims, but as 2 people who have gotten through something together and now want to talk about it. I'm sure it's probably very therapeutic for them.
Any predictions whether it's going to be a boy or a girl?
Well, I wouldn't call this a source, but my mum is convinced that it's a girl. Apparently, your face becomes a little fuller if it's a girl. So who knows?
We'll put that theory to the test.
Well, I mean, the best source is your mom. Come on now, everybody knows that. So, I mean, I'll take that.
Listen, mom knows best.
Yes.
He does. And, you know, once this thing is out on air, in fact, it's actually going to be screened in South Africa on Monday. One of our local channels have got the rights to it. But from your side, what I'm particularly interested in is whether or not you're going to be doing a little bit of an autopsy of that particular interview. Because, I mean, we have been following your reporting and it's been accurate. It's been so enjoyable. In fact, even something like the AirPod, that works for me. I think it's fantastic. And this Finding Freedom book. So can we expect a bit of an unpacking from your side after?
Oh, well, firstly, thank you. I mean, yes, I mean, this is kind of what I do. I will be up on Sunday night until 3 or 4 a.m. watching it live. And, you know, they've really done a great job of keeping this under lock and key. No one really knows the full extent of what made it into the final cut. I don't even know how involved Harry and Meghan were in seeing that final version of it. But there's going to be a lot to talk about over the weeks ahead. I'll certainly be part of it. But for me, I'm mostly interested to hear more of the stories that perhaps I couldn't get close enough to in the book. You know, we touched on a lot of the issues that they face within the institution, but nothing beats hearing it from the mouths of those that actually experienced it. You know, contrary to popular belief, Harry and Meghan didn't write my book, and I think a lot of people sort of made that accusation over the past year. But we got very close to the story, and I'm looking forward to hearing it from them in their own words.
It is going to be an interesting weekend, an interview that I feel is going to change a lot. And it's going to give the monarchy a lot to think about, whether that be negative or positive. I'm hoping for a positive result there because, as we mentioned all the way in the beginning, we're looking at an institution that has failed to keep up with the times. People love each other. People have free will. People have lives. And people have a right to be together in the way they want to be together. And this has been what the media has been spinning all the way around, is the fact that there's been too much interception from this firm. And hopefully this is going to give them something to think about, to allow even the incumbents of all of the positions in the monarchy to just know that you're dealing with human beings here and not some sort of, pawns of the royal family. It can't work like that anymore. Yeah,
it'd be a real shame, I think. The royal family has such positive impacts in so much of the philanthropic space. But time and time again, we've seen women affected by the institution. Princess Diana, Sarah Ferguson, now Meghan, and I think that there's something there that needs to be looked at. Perhaps the outsider needs a little bit more care as they navigate what is an impossible journey to take on.
Well, we want to thank you so much for your time. I think we spilt a lot of tea.
We did.
In South Africa, we call it rooibos. That's the tea that we drink here when we are spilling it. But I think you've given us...
I remember it. I was there with Harry and Meghan on the trip.
Great.
We drank a lot.
Would you say drank a lot of rooibos or drank a lot in general?
Just the tea.
Okay, all right. I'm just checking.
We are here to spill the tea.
But I really appreciate your time today, and I'm looking forward to your autopsy, so to speak, with regard to this interview and going forward. I hope that they are going to just carve out the life that they deserve, which is a life of just loving each other and being human beings, which is the one thing that we all have a right to do. So thank you very much once again. Finding Freedom, the book, love it. AirPod, any other platforms we can find you on unpacking?
No, I'm on Twitter at Scobie if you want to see what I'm rambling on about today.
We'd love to check that out as well. But thank you very much, Omid. I really appreciate it. Please have yourself a fantastic day. And we look forward to Sunday and, of course, here in South Africa, Monday, for what is going to be one of the most interesting and
Probably
talked about impactful interviews that we would have ever seen with regard to that space, the royal family.
Yeah, popcorn at the ready. Thanks for having me, guys.